So going into the game, we did see Crystal Palace being prepared to sit off United quite passively, allowing them to progress the ball out of their defensive third in the build-up with very little resistance, which was also a tactic that Steve Cooper deployed in the second leg of the League Cup semi-final against Nottingham Forest. And as I pointed out in that video, which will be linked in the description, this is probably going to be the default tactic of most sides when they do come up against United, as under Ten Hag, United are now extremely proficient at playing out from the back, even when the opposition looks to man press them high up the pitch, as we saw in the first leg of that League Cup semi-final against Forest, which I broke down in the same video that I previously mentioned, which will be linked below. So for most of the game, well, until Casemiro turned into the Undertaker, United dominated possession in the middle third, with Palace sitting off in a vertically compact 4-4-2 shape, with Elise and Edouard, the front two, not pressing Varane and Lisandro Martinez, and instead looking to cut the passing lanes into Casemiro behind them. United's default possession shape was a 2-3-2-3, with Wan-Bissaka and Shaw initially retaining higher positions, leaving Martinez and Varane as a back two, though as I've stated many times, United's positional system in possession is very fluid, and so we often saw one of Luke Shaw or Wan-Bissaka dropping into that back line, giving United a wider free at the back base to circulate the ball around the front two of Elise and Edouard, seeing the shape shift more into that familiar 3-1-6 or 3-1-3-3 shape, whatever you want to call it, with Casemiro at the base in the single pivot, and Fred and Bruno Fernandes alongside one of the fullbacks, or even Antony and Rashford at times, sitting centrally in behind the Palace midfield line. From a tactical theory standpoint, the key players to focus on when looking to break down a narrow 4-4-2 or 4-4-1-1 shape, like the one that Patrick Vieira was deploying, are the wide midfielders, which in this game was Jeffrey Schlupp and Jordan Ayew, and this is because it's their positioning which keeps a defensive shape vertically compact, and so if you can draw them away from the central midfielder on their inside, then you can open up space between the midfield line to exploit. The most efficient way of doing this is to move to a back three in possession, which United did, as this means that you have a numerical advantage against the front two, and when you circulate the ball quickly from one side to the other, the wide player in that quarterback-like role, in this example it's Luke Shaw from the left and Varane from the right, though we did see a number of different players take up these positions, has space and time when they do receive the ball. From here the wide midfielder has to make a decision. If he chooses to hold his position deep in the midfield line in order to stop the player in behind him, Fred for example, being able to position himself in the half space, then this affords the player in that wide position in the back three time and space to either pick a pass or carry the ball forward past the front two. However, if the wide midfielder looks to push out and close down the United player's space, this opens up space in behind them for one of United's players further up the pitch to drop into. In this game, we saw Palace's wide midfielders Schlupp and Ayew take the latter approach, pushing out and looking to press the United player in that quarterback position, and so this did open up space in behind them, but also on the flanks, where United could then funnel the ball down and potentially create a 1v1 situation for Rashford and Antony against the Palace fullbacks, although I didn't think United did enough of this in this game, and so United's main obstacle throughout most of the game was breaking down Crystal Palace from these wide positions in the final third. I think with Luke Shaw and Rashford on the left side, United have a fullback and winger combination who are both producing world-class or at the very least top level offensive output, with both players on the same wavelength, and both being very decisive with what they do, whether this is forward passing, taking on a player, bursting past a player, or exchanging a 1-2 and making a forward run. Here we see as United have pushed Palace back into their defensive third that because Ayew on the right takes up a narrow position to keep Palace's midfield compact, this means that when the ball does get circulated back to Martinez from the right side, United have a clear passing channel open, allowing them to quickly funnel the ball out to Shaw on the left side. From here United can now isolate Klein and Ayew against Rashford and Shaw, and they do this seamlessly, via Luke Shaw moving the ball onto Rashford, who has held his width, pulling Nathaniel Klein out to the flank, and Richards, the right-sided centre-back, holds a central position in the box, and Decore doesn't drop into that space either between the right-back and centre-back, so Shaw is able to make an underlapping run off of Ayew, and Rashford, as he's done so many times over the past month or so, slows the ball down to a stationary point, and then picks a perfect time to thread a well-weighted pass into Shaw's path, allowing United to get into a very dangerous position inside the Palace box. On the right side, we also saw United able to take advantage of Palace's narrow midfield by funneling the ball down the side of the Palace system. However, unlike the left side, I thought United's right side was nowhere near as effective or creative when in these positions, and I have to say I think it's down to personnel. Whilst I would consider both Rashford and Shaw top level in terms of their abilities to progress the ball into dangerous positions and then create from there, Wan-Bissaka and Antony as a partnership are nowhere near that level. I didn't think that Wan-Bissaka was necessarily poor in in this game. He is improving game on game from where he was before Ten Hag, but he certainly isn't elite or at Shaw's level, and so he can't carry Antony in the same way that maybe an Achraf Hakimi or a Jeremy Frimpong could. But I have to say that I think Antony was very poor in the first half of this game. In pretty much most of the important aspects, there was multiple times where United had the opportunity to counter quickly with Palace caught upfield, such as here where Mitchell is caught upfield and Casemiro plays a fantastic pass to release Antony down the right flank, and you can see that Antony has a few yards head start on Mitchell, and as he gets midway inside the Palace half, United are in a very good position with a 2v1 on the far side, with Antony also having the space to carry the ball into, but he just seemed to have a complete inability to even use his right foot functionally, and so proceeds to slow the attack down to a point where 3 Palace players move across, and he should at the very least be looking to switch play out to Rashford on the far flank. Instead he overcomplicates things and ends up allowing the Palace players to get goal side, as well as allowing an additional 2 players to come over and shut off the 2v1 on the far side. And this wasn't the only notable example of Antony doing this. Here he receives the ball with Mitchell completely out of the picture, goal side of Will Hughes, who certainly isn't the quickest, and Antony, rather than driving forward into the space in front of him, or even looking to take advantage of the 2v2 on the far side, instead proceeds to do a number of ball rolls on his left foot, slowing the attack down to the point where Will Hughes is able to get goal side, and now Antony has been completely shut off, and once again another promising quick transitioning attacking opportunity has been wasted through Antony's lack of efficiency. Now a lot of people, well probably the minority if I had to guess, will say that I'm being harsh on Antony. However, I think this is just a cop-out, as these were probably the same people who were likely slating Fred and McTominay continuously over the past few seasons, and to be honest, if it was Anthony Elanga doing things like this, we'd probably be slating him as well. The only reason Antony is being protected is because of his price tag, which it is true it isn't his fault, but even if he cost £15 million, I would still say that this type of thing, which he does routinely, is just poor play. And yes, he does need time to adapt, but this isn't Antony FC, it's Manchester United, who need to be looking to challenge the likes of City and Arsenal, and you can't continuously play a player who costs a team in situations like this, just because they are Brazilian and cost 85 million. At the moment, I think Garnacho, who I will come on to later on in the video, is much more deserving of a place in the starting 11 than Antony, even on the right side, and I would say that both Sancho and Garnacho, and even Elanga as well, deserve to be given chances ahead of the Brazilian in upcoming games. I will be doing a full video on Antony, analysing him in greater detail from a statistical and tactical point of view, as well as looking at the bright parts of his game and how he can still develop into a top level talent. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and click the bell so you do get notified when that video comes out. But United's dominance in possession didn't just come about from what they did with the ball, but also how they pressed Palace and stopped them being able to progress the ball comfortably out of their defensive third. Here we see United pressing Palace's 2-4-3-1 shape in a familiar narrow 4-1-2-3 shape that we often see Ten Hag use, with Rashford and Antony sitting high and narrow either side of Weghorst, though in this case United's defensive shape, or pressing shape should I say, was a bit more lopsided, with Rashford starting higher looking to press Chris Richards, the right-sided centre-back, and Antony sitting slightly deeper, cutting off the pass out to the left-back Tyrell Mitchell, as Weghorst would apply pressure to Gueye and Guita, with Fred and Fernandes pushed up tight onto the double pivot of Decore and Will Hughes. And so because of this aggressive pressure on Palace in their own box, every short passing option was being closed off, and Palace were forced into long passes, either out to the fullbacks or upfield, which most of the time didn't come off and simply handed possession back to United. Here we see a situation where Gueye attempts to play out with a pass into Schlupp, who drops off into the space behind Fred and Fernandes, but Wan-Bissaka follows his movement, sticking tight to him and stopping him being able to turn when he receives the ball. I thought Palace ironically needed a target man up front like Weghorst, who could have held up and controlled long passes into his chest or feet, as any time they went long, both Martinez and Varane were fairly comfortable in battling Edouard and stopping Palace being able to retain possession. Going into half time, United had the better of the game, but they weren't creating a substantial amount of chances, and the goal did come from a slightly fortunate penalty decision which Bruno Fernandes took impeccably, but United had an XG of just 1.46 to Palace's 0.54 at half time, but around 0.70 of United's XG did come from the penalty, so in reality it was a game that was still on a knife edge, despite United controlling the ball and pressing Palace very well. Garnacho did come on in the second half, and I thought he made a massive difference and was the catalyst behind the second goal. He picks up the ball on the left side and does well to circulate circulate the ball back to the centre, with Palace pushed back into their defensive third in and around the box. The ball gets circulated to Wan-Bissaka, and Garnacho carries on his run, and now finds himself in a central position around the box. Antony, to be fair, does well to move the ball quickly on the right side, with a series of quick passes, and Wan-Bissaka is a man to play a penetrating pass into Casemiro on the edge of the box, who then plays a well-weighted cutting pass into Garnacho inside of the box, and the young Argentine shows superb composure and ball control to retain possession inside of the box, working the ball out to the left side, and because Shaw has held his width while Garnacho has moved in field, he is the outlet, and Garnacho's pass is weighted exactly so that Shaw can deliver a first-time low cross into the 6-yard box, and as Shaw is about to play this ball, we can see that Richards is actually in a decent position here to cut off the ball into Rashford, but like Akanji a couple of weeks ago against Rashford, he lacks the awareness and doesn't realise that he just needs to hold his position, and moves out of the way, opening up that passing lane, and just as he did against Manchester City, Rashford has the poacher-like instinct to just hold his position, knowing that he's already in the perfect position in a dangerous area, and Shaw can find him, which he does, and the finish is almost identical to the one in the Manchester derby, just opening his foot to slot the ball past Guita and give United a much needed 2-0 lead. Now from here on out, everything pretty much went to shit after Antony decided to do probably the most inappropriately timed rainbow flick I've ever seen, which indirectly led to an all-out brawl, and Casemiro almost choking the life out of Will Hughes to get a red card. Schlupp then scored from a scrappy corner, and United all of a sudden have gone from controlling the game to hanging on for dear life. And so from here down to 10 men with what ended up being around 25 minutes left, United reverted to a 4-4-1 shape with an extremely narrow midfield four, with the wide midfielders tucking in, looking to stop Palace getting space in the half space, but in doing so they obviously had to sacrifice space on the flanks, and so Palace had joy at the end of the game, progressing the ball into United's defensive third down the flanks and getting into crossing positions, and so both Wan-Bissaka and Shaw had to deal with a lot more 1v1 situations. And I thought Luke Shaw in particular against Michael Olise did a fantastic job of defending, not jumping in but instead remaining composed even inside of the box. But the other issue for United, which they didn't deal with anywhere near as well, was the void left by Casemiro in the centre of the pitch, and Fred just isn't a natural defensive midfielder in these situations, as there were a few times where Palace were able to drive straight through the heart of United's midfield. However, United got through this game in the end, mostly down to some outstanding individual performances, with Lisandro Martinez in particular being outstanding. Here we see as the ball gets worked down Palace's left, that as the ball goes across the box, Martinez matches the Palace player's run perfectly and puts in an inch perfect block to save United yet again. This also coincided with Ten Hag shifting to a back five later on in the game using a 5-3-1 shape, and this gave United an extra body to plug holes in the back line. And we can see here that as the ball gets shifted out to Olise on the right, Shaw is able to close him down, knowing that with three centre backs behind him, Lisandro Martinez can come across and track Klein's run in behind him, and he does this astutely, tracking the run and then putting in a firm challenge to win the ball. As the game went on, United were being put under more and more pressure, and I think we saw an example of one of De Gea's weaknesses that we don't see too often. Here Olise puts in a cross from a set piece, and David De Gea should be claiming this pretty easily, but instead he opts to punch it, but doesn't clear the box, leading to a volley back into the 6-yard box, and but for Fernandes' aerial challenge, Mateta may have been able to put the ball into the net. Now David De Gea did make a fantastic save from a corner also around this same period, but it's his cross claiming which is the issue for me, as if United had a keeper who was competent at claiming crosses like this, it just takes all of the pressure off the team and avoids scenarios like this one that led to Mateta's header over the bar. But in the end United managed to hang on by the skin of their teeth, with Varane and Sabitzer also being two players who I think definitely aided United significantly from a defensive point of view at the end of the game. So overall a good victory, a lot of positives to take from the game, including United continuing to showcase how they can dominate games through that 3-1-6 possession system. However, there are a few potential issues beginning to show, particularly with Casemiro now banned for what looks like 3 games, which alongside Eriksen's absence is going to give Ten Hag a massive conundrum to solve. So let me know what you thought of the game in the comment section below, give the video a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel and click the bell so you do get notified when my videos come out. You can check the description for some more videos as well, and follow me on Twitter and Instagram for more content.